This is just what I wanted to see.
If you were to ask someone to name an original PlayStation game just off the top of their head, there's a strong chance that their answer will be Crash Bandicoot. This game was kind of a big deal when it launched back in September of 1996, and there's a pretty good reason why.
Hey, plumber boy, mustache man, your worst nightmare has arrived.
So Sony entered the console game in late 1994 in Japan, and then later on in 1995 in North America.
$2.99.
At that time, there were two titans that ruled over the gaming industry, that being Sega and Nintendo. Now, what made these companies so popular? That would be mascots like Sonic the Hedgehog and Super Mario. These characters had become more recognizable to children than Mickey Mouse or even Ronald McDonald. Sony, having observed their competitors, took a good look at their little gray box and were like, hey, yeah, we probably need a character like that. Enter Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, otherwise known as a little studio that you may have heard of called Naughty Dog. After releasing their latest game, Way of the Warrior, for the Panasonic 3DO, the two paired up with the publishing company Universal Interactive Studios to begin working on their next project, nicknamed the Sonic's Ass Game. Yeah, that's what they called it. The duo saw how racing, fighting, and shooting games were making the transition to a 3D perspective and noticed that there was a severe lack of 3D action platforming games. They figured that in a 3D perspective, the player would be constantly looking at the character's rear end, hence the nickname. The team chose to develop for the Sony PlayStation as it was, and I quote, sexy. Sure, man, whatever floats your boat. I'm not one to judge. Finally, in September of 1996, the world was introduced to Willy the Wombat. No, that's stupid.
Crash Bandicoot should have been a genius, but he doesn't quite compute. Crash Bandicoot. Anything can happen now that Crash is in pursuit.
A marsupial on a mission to save his well-endowed GF Tawna from a mad scientist manlet named Dr. Neo Cortex. And with that history lesson out of the way, let's take a closer look at the game itself to see what made it such an icon of the PlayStation library. Crash Bandicoot is an action platformer that blends 2D and 3D gameplay, switching the perspective on a level-to-level basis. At times you'll be controlling Crash from a side view, typical of most platformers before it, and other times you'll be controlling him from a following behind view. Yeah, nowadays you're probably thinking, wow, whatever, big deal. But it's important to view the game through the eyes of someone in 1996. Up until this point, the vast majority of platform games looked like this. Not bad by any stretch, but dated. Gaming was making a big push to embrace 3D graphics and gameplay, for better or for worse. Looking at you, 𝗵𝗲𝘂𝗍𝒑. And Crash was one of the few to do it well right out of the gate. The game opens with the evil scientists, Dr. 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗽 and his assistant, Dr. 𝗵𝗵𝗶𝘀, sticking a poor, innocent Bandicoot into a device called the Cortex Vortex. The Vortex is meant to transform everyday creatures into super soldiers to help the doctors take over the world. But with Crash, the experiment fails. Instead of making him an intimidating army general, he comes out a goofy idiot. Crash then breaks free and escapes the lab by jumping from a window, falling into the ocean below. Having lost their previous test subject, Cortex's minions bring out their next target, 𝗁𝗏, Crash's love interest. Fade to black. Very dramatic. Crash washes up on the nearby 𝗬𝗏𝗃𝗃 beach, where our adventure begins. The game is split up into 3 main islands that act as hub worlds, and 33 stages total. The main goal of each stage is to reach the end portal, breaking crates and beating enemies along the way. Stages are relatively simple in terms of layout, using a hallway style approach. This means that you are on a set path and branching pathways are kept to a very low minimum. Some may dislike this approach, but in my opinion, I feel like it keeps the gameplay focused. Crash controls surprisingly well for an early 3D game. There's really only 1 or 2 things he can do aside from running, that being jumping and spinning, both of which can be used to defeat the majority of enemies you'll see on screen. My only real nitpick with the controls is just how heavy Crash feels. My man feels like he has bricks in the pockets of those jorts. This can make some of the trickier jumps harder than they should be. You gotta commit to the jumps you make, as Crash's mid-air control is very minimal. Once you jumped, you've jumped. There is no going back. Additionally, the camera can be positioned at a weird angle sometimes, making it hard to tell exactly where you're gonna land after a jump, but it doesn't happen too often. Scattered throughout each stage of the game are 2 types of crates, one called TNT that explode when jumped on or spun, and one containing a variety of items, those being 𝗵𝗶𝗂𝗽 masks, 𝗵𝗵𝗿 fruit, 1-up tokens, and character tokens. Crash is a pretty frail guy, only being able to suffer a single hit before losing a life. By collecting up to 2 𝗵𝗶𝗂𝗽 masks, Crash gains 2 additional hit points and becomes temporarily invincible if collecting a third. Collecting 100 𝗵𝗶𝗿 fruit will award you with an extra life, and collecting a 1-up token provides you a life instantly. Collecting 3 character tokens will take you up to a bonus stage with, you guessed it, more extra lives. This game loves to throw extra lives at you, but yeah, trust me, you're gonna need them. Crash isn't an impossibly difficult game, but it's not easy either. Some of the later stages can be absolutely brutal, but with the abundance of lives and checkpoints, you shouldn't have too hard of a time. Unless, of course, you're going for 100% completion, but we'll come back to that a little later on. Occasionally, you'll encounter boss stages, but none of them are really that difficult. Most of the time, they just require you to stand still and wait for an opening to attack. My favorite boss of the bunch has to be 𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗽. He'll jump from platform to platform in a set pattern, and you need to jump on the TNT crates to blow them up when he's close by. It's a nice change of pace compared to the other bosses that share that same stand in place and wait to attack formula. Oh yeah, and when you beat 𝗵𝗶𝗶𝗀𝗽, don't stand too close to him when he's defeated. I used to find this hilarious as a kid. The final boss Cortex is a pretty easy fight. You need to dodge his purple and blue beams that he fires, and spin attack the green shots back at him. After taking him down, he falls down into the ocean below, similarly to the opening scene of Crash falling. And with that, 𝗁𝗏 is saved and the two fly off into the sunset. Graphically, the game is gorgeous for the original PlayStation, with beautiful environments and decently high quality models, but some of the enemies can be a little oversimplified looking. Crash, Cortex, and all of the other boss characters are incredibly expressive with lots of stretch and squish action. The game is actually quite over the top in terms of personality. Crash has so many unique death animations that give it a real Looney Tunes Saturday morning cartoon feeling. By the end of your playthrough, you'll end up seeing most of these, which is a great segue back into the discussion of difficulty. Do you remember the crates I was telling you about? They're a little more important than just giving you some extra lives. This is a gem. To get a gem, you need to break every box in a stage. Yeah, simple enough, right? Here's the kicker. You need to do this without dying. Not even a single death is forgiven. For some of the later levels, this will make you want to tear every single hair out of your head. There's a special place in hell for Generator Room and Slippery Climb. These stages are a true nightmare to get the gem in. Sometimes, you'll make it to the end of the stage in a single life, smashing every crate along the way, only for the game to tell you that you missed some. How? Where? Well, allow me to introduce colored gems. These gems can be grabbed later on in the game and open up new pathways in previous stages, leading to the remaining crates. So if you're a new player unaware of the hidden paths or colored gems, you'll be pulling your hair out, just like I said, trying to find the crates that you missed. This isn't bad game design per se, but it would be nice if the game told you which stages contained the colored gems. You can see where you need the colored gems, just not where to get them. Even then, you still need to beat those specific stages, breaking all of the boxes in a single life, just to get the colored gems. And of course, they're some of the hardest stages in the game. Once again, there's a special place in hell for Generator Room and Slippery Climb. Yeah, I did it. And you know what? Here's the password to skip ahead to 100% completion because no one deserves to suffer through this challenge. I did this once as a kid somehow, and once again now for the review, and honestly, this will most likely be the last time. It is just too brutal of a challenge. You at least get a different ending if you manage to grab all of the gems, giving closure to each of the character with funny blurbs about what happened to them after the events of Cortex's defeat. Do yourself a favor, use my password, and just watch the alternate ending. Don't bother with trying to 100% it yourself, it'll take a few years off of your lifespan. So that's a quick look at Crash Bandicoot. I do recommend giving this one a shot, just please, I'm begging you, don't go for 100% completion. On its own, just a plain old beat the game playthrough, it can be a good time. The game controls well, looks great for PlayStation standards, and has some great tunes as well. You can pick it up fairly cheap used, or digitally for the PlayStation 3. Oh yeah, and I should probably mention back in 2017, the original trilogy of Crash games got a from the ground up remake with the Crash Bandicoot N. Sane Trilogy. Visually, these are just gorgeous remakes that don't do too much to change up the original formula. In the case of Crash 1, time trials were added to each stage, so if you didn't hate yourself enough by collecting all the gems, now you can hate yourself even more with time trials. One thing that was added was the level Stormy Ascent. In the original PlayStation release, this stage was fully finished but cut due to how difficult it was. And yeah, thank goodness it was. This stage is beyond a pain in the ass. If I had to get the gem in this stage in order to get 100% in the original, I probably would have left it at 99%. There isn't too much left to say in regards to the remakes, but as these are the most accessible way to play the original Crash trilogy, I do recommend picking them up if this is going to be your first time playing. It sure would be nice to be able to play the original PlayStation discs in our PlayStation 4s and PlayStation 5s though, Sony. Yeah, so once again, that's Crash Bandicoot, a great start to an iconic series. Personally, I can't think of the PlayStation without thinking of the Crash games. While not my favorite of the trilogy, it definitely paved the way for future titles to build on it and improve the formula. Things can only get better going forward for the Orange Marsupial. I'll see you next time when we take a look at the sequel, Crash Bandicoot 2. Hey everybody, I only have 20 seconds to do this, so I have to be quick. Thank you so much for checking out the first review on this channel. This took quite a bit of work between recording gameplay and, writing the script, so I really hope you enjoyed. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to my supporters on Patreon. Without their help and support, this would not have been possible. You guys rock. I stream a few days a week, so if you'd like to see more and keep up with me, make sure to like and subscribe.